Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Mr. Perfect by Aimee Nicole Walker, narrated by Tristan James. Chapter 1. A shrill sound woke Felix from a deep sleep. What was it? The neighbor's vicious peacocks shrieking in the bushes outside his window again? No, that wasn't the right noise. By the time it sounded again, Felix was wide awake and fully aware of what had woken him. A phone. To most, a ringing phone in the dead of night was a bad thing. To a reporter, it was the sound of opportunity and possibility. Would this be the story that brought them fame and notoriety? Any reporter who claimed not to want those things was full of shit. They either were lying to themselves or just everyone around them. Felix was many things, some of them unpleasant, but self-delusional wasn't among his attributes or flaws. He knew who he was, what he wanted, and what it took to make it happen. He didn't lie to himself or anyone around him. It was the only way to live. Felix retracted his right hand from beneath his pillow. He reached for his phone, but connected with a second pillow where his nightstand should have been. Wait a minute. He was on the wrong side of the bed. That alone wasn't enough to induce panic, but the sleepy voice answering the phone from his normal side of the bed was. Oh, God. The events of the evening assailed him, one earth-shattering technicolor image after the other. It wasn't his phone ringing. He wasn't even sleeping in his bed. Fuck. Oh, fuck. What have I done? Chapter 2. 2 weeks earlier.
He's a sanctimonious prick, and I can't stand him,
Felix growled into his phone as he pulled into the parking lot at work. He'd once dreamed of a grander position than the lead investigative reporter for a mid-size market newspaper. Savannah Morning News was supposed to be the first stop on a huge adventure, but Felix was still here 13 years later. He was happy. Scratch that. Happiness was as foreign a concept as living on Mars. Felix was content. Right?
Of course,
Rihanna, his best friend since college, said, yanking his focus back to their conversation.
I don't like your patronizing tone, Ree,
Felix shot back.
I haven't had enough coffee to deal with your bullshit, Fee.
She was the only person on the planet he'd let get away with calling him such a ridiculous name. Ree and Fee, 2 peas in a pod. Felix had been the poorest kid, and Rihanna had been the only black student in their journalism program at Emory. They attended the university on scholarships and grants, while most of the kids were there on their parents' dimes. They never let Felix and Rihanna forget it, either. Felix was bitter then, and he was bitter now. Ree had fared much better than he, and deservedly so. She was the best person he knew.
You're the one who called me,
Felix reminded her.
To wish you a happy birthday, not to get started on your old grievances against Jude Arrow.
The straight shooter. Christ. The moniker infuriated Felix more than he should permit.
I'm not the one who spoke his name,
Ree snorted.
I just asked if you've run into him since he moved to Savannah. He's living here?
Felix asked, feigning stupid. Oh, how he wished he didn't know the backstabbing bastard was living in Savannah. Felix didn't believe ignorance was bliss in any situation besides this one. Knowing Jude lived here and worked for Channel 11 only stirred up trouble he couldn't ignore.
This is me you're talking to. There's no need to pretend.
Warmth and compassion suffused Rihanna's voice.
Have you seen him?
No. It felt like he'd been holding his breath every day for 6 months, waiting to run into Jude someplace. A small part of his brain had expected Jude to seek him out and take another swing at the apologies Felix had refused to accept in college. Felix didn't need to be a smug bastard, although he was the smuggest of them all, to expect Jude to know he worked for Savannah Morning News. It was equally unbelievable another investigative journalist, even one who specialized in another medium, hadn't heard of the Sinister in Savannah podcast Felix had formed with his two friends, Jonah and Rocky. Hell, the trio had recently appeared in an interview for the morning show Jude's network produced. Jude had most likely known, but made no attempt to seek out Felix, and that's what pissed him off the most. Irrationally so, since he'd told Jude on graduation day to never speak his name again, let alone talk directly to him. Ree's sigh was as thick as the humid June air hovering over his beloved city. Felix knew what she was going to say, or at least what she wanted to say. Holding on to his grudges seemed unhealthy to her, but they fueled Felix to push harder, kept him hungry and in fighting form. Felix never again wanted to be the butt of anyone's jokes or the emotional punching bag for bullies, and he refused to spend another day in poverty. He might not be wealthy, but Felix was far removed from the always hungry kid with the hand-me-down clothes from Goodwill. Some days it felt like his childhood was a different lifetime ago, or had belonged to someone else entirely. Whenever he started to forget, Felix made himself remember by pulling out his school photo from second grade. Staring at his hollow eyes in the gaunt, dirty face would ground him. Felix remembered getting himself ready for school as best he could, without running water, food, or clean clothes. Hell, sometimes they didn't even have electricity. Even if his mother had stayed sober long enough to buy food with her monthly stipend, it would often spoil when the power company disconnected their service for delinquent payments. On that picture day, he'd picked his favorite shirt up off the floor and put it on, even though he'd worn it the day before and knew his classmates would tease him mercilessly. Felix had held his head high and pretended their barbs hadn't landed. The scrawny kid with the haunted eyes wasn't the only thing Felix noticed when he looked at the old photo. He saw determination in the straight posture and squared shoulders. He'd wielded that fortitude like a shield, deflected as many jabs and poisonous barbs as possible. His strategy worked. Most of the bullies had lost interest in picking on a kid who hadn't given them the reaction they'd wanted. Todd Dartmouth was the only one who'd made it his personal mission to single-handedly destroy Felix's spirit, but he never could. Not on picture day in elementary school when he'd teased Felix about the shirt. Not in high school when Todd recognized the jeans Felix wore were a pair Todd's mother had donated to Goodwill when the knees started to wear too thin. Not ever. "I know, Ree," Felix finally said, because he did. There had to be healthier ways to stay hungry than clinging to the most hurtful times in his life. "Enough about me. My life is as boring as watching paint dry. You and your podcast friends were interviewed on Good Morning America. You find that boring?" "No," Felix said. He loved every aspect of producing Sinister in Savannah. As much as he loved the content, his favorite part was the brotherhood he'd formed with Rocky and Jonah. "The podcast is going great, and Ride the Lightning's success has blown us away," Felix said. The story of the 1982 murder of a drag queen and the coerced confession that followed 13 years later had become an overnight sensation. "But," Ree prompted, "something is off or missing. I can't quite put a finger on it." "Maybe you need to get laid." Felix was in the middle of a particularly lengthy dry spell. Was that it? Or maybe a man turns 35 and starts seeing the world differently. "Is your biological clock ticking, too?" Ree teased. She and her husband, Stephen, had been trying to get pregnant for over a year. The last time they'd spoken, Ree mentioned looking into fertility specialists and adoption. "That's all you, gorgeous. Have you and Stephen reached a decision?"
"We have," she said, after a pause. "I know people think we're crazy, but we decided to seek help from a fertility specialist." "Why would anyone fault you for doing everything you can to become pregnant? Whose business is it anyway?" "Our families are just worried about the expense," Ree replied. "Are you asking them to pay for it?" Ree laughed. "Of course not. But we will have to take money out of our retirement accounts or refinance the house, and there are no guarantees it will work." "It definitely won't work if you don't try." "I could lend you the money," Felix offered. "I love you with all my heart for offering, but I can't accept. You have no idea how much money I'm talking about," Ree said. "I won't even know how expensive it will be until after Stephen and I have completed all the exams and screenings." "I did some research when you brought it up a few months ago. I've heard enough about the process over the years to know it's expensive. I love you, Ree. You want a baby, and I want to see it happen."
Felix didn't make the offer lightly. His biggest fear was to make a mistake that would send him back to an impoverished existence. He had looked into the eyes of rapists and killers during interviews and hadn't hesitated to ask tough questions. Felix had been threatened with violence when he got too close to someone who hadn't wanted their misdeeds exposed. None of those things disrupted his sleep or caused him to break out into a cold sweat. Recalling the hollow sensation of an empty stomach was enough to trigger nightmares and insomnia for days, if not weeks. Felix knew what it was to covet something so much that it took over your life. He was able to help, and he would, if Ree let him.
"It sounds so shallow," Ree said softly. "There are so many babies out there who need a good home. Stephen and I have so much love to offer them. We made a pact. We'll give the fertility thing a try for a year, but we are going to adopt regardless of the outcome. If I don't get pregnant, we'll begin the process right away. If I do get pregnant, then we'll adopt in a few years. You and Stephen will make amazing parents. Let me help you." "No way. I appreciate your kindness. It means more to me than you'll ever know." "Anything for my best girl. The offer still stands if you change your mind."
They chatted for another 15 minutes until Felix spotted the rookie journalist pulling up in front of the newspaper. The kid rubbed him the wrong way. No one was as perfect as this kid pretended to be, always dressed impeccably and never in a bad mood. Felix called bullshit. Minerva, the paper's editor, and his immediate boss, ate it up, though. So Felix was careful what he said about Jimmy Alsop.
"Felix, honey, you're growling," Ree said. "Are you thinking about Jude again? That damn do-gooder rookie writer just pulled in. I see him checking his hair in the mirror, and I just want to stomp over there and mess it up." "So mature."
Felix laughed.
"I didn't say I was proud of the urge. Isn't it enough that I recognize it and don't act on it? It's a good start."
Felix watched the 20-something man get out of his car with a bakery box and walk quickly to the front of the building.
"I better get in there before Jimmy starts measuring my office for the replacement furniture he plans to install once I'm gone." "You think he's gunning for your job, huh?" "I know so." "It won't do any good," Ree said. "Minerva loves you." "Until someone shinier comes along," Felix replied. "Today is not that day, and that's all I can be sure of, really." "True. I love you, Fee. I can't wait to see you this weekend."
They'd made plans for Felix to drive to Atlanta to celebrate the big 3-5.
"Love you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you too. Give Stephen my love." "Will do."
Felix disconnected the call, turned off his car, and headed inside.
What surprises will darling Jimmy have in store for me today?
It didn't take him long to find out. He'd strung a colorful banner across the break room that read, "Happy Birthday, Felix." Jimmy had his back to the door and didn't know Felix had arrived. The rookie removed brightly decorated cupcakes from the pastry box and arranged them on a 3-tiered display thingy. He completed his task and stood back to admire or assess his work. Felix wasn't sure what he wanted to do more, eat one or shove it in Jimmy's face. The rookie reporter adjusted the pale green cupcake at the top by moving it a few centimeters to the right. "Now it's perfect. Except you missed the comma between birthday and my name." "Oh!" Jimmy gasped. He spun around, placing his hand over his heart. "You scared me." "Sorry about that." Felix wasn't. "What's going on here?" Jimmy laughed nervously, gesturing to the banner. "I figured it was pretty self-explanatory." "Okay, I can see what's going on. Maybe the better question is, why are we having a celebration for my birthday? I've worked here for 13 years, and I've never had a birthday party." "Maybe that's due to your prickly attitude," Jimmy countered. "I'd believe that if I was the only one who hadn't received a banner and cupcakes before you came along." Jimmy blew out an exasperated breath. "Can't you allow someone to do something nice for you?" With the exception of his friends, people didn't do things for Felix unless they wanted something in exchange. "No?" Jimmy narrowed his eyes and crossed his arms over his chest. "Don't you think that says more about you than it does other people?" "Maybe, Jimmy. It still doesn't explain why we're starting a new tradition with me. Why not Maureen from Classifieds? Her birthday was 2 weeks ago. No cupcakes, no banner. Holton's birthday was last month. No cupcakes, no banner. So again, I ask, why me?" "James." "Excuse me?" Felix asked. Jimmy rolled his eyes. "My name is James, and sometimes people call me Jamie. No one calls me Jimmy." "No one?" Felix asked, quirking a brow. "Okay, my mama still does. Everyone else calls me James or Jamie." "I've been calling you Jimmy since you arrived," Felix countered. "And I've corrected you each time." "Yet you make a banner and bring in cupcakes for my birthday. Why?" Jimmy sighed as heavily as Ree had. Felix understood. He was exhausting, especially when something didn't add up. Felix had been downright rude to Jimmy from day one, and yet the kid set up a little birthday party. Felix smelled a rat. The younger man ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up and somehow making it look even better. "You don't like me, and it bothers me." "I don't know you," Felix countered. "If you want to succeed in this business, then you better find a way to squelch your people-pleasing tendencies. You'll burn out in a year. You need to write the unvarnished truth about whatever story you uncover, and not pull your punches just because someone might not like it. I've been an asshole to you since the day we met. I don't deserve cupcakes and a banner, even one with incorrect punctuation." Jimmy groaned and covered his face, and Felix felt bad about embarrassing him. Sort of. "Even though you shouldn't have gone to the trouble, I have every intention of stuffing one of those cupcakes in my mouth." "Yeah?" Jimmy asked, sounding hopeful. "Absolutely." "Thank you for the cupcakes and the banner." "Even though I forgot the comma?" Jimmy asked. "Yes, Jimmy." The young reporter rolled his eyes. "You're sticking with Jimmy, huh?" Felix smiled as he crossed the room. He snagged a strawberry cupcake off the display and said, "Absolutely. James is too formal, and Jamie is too—" Felix waved his empty hand around in the air as he searched for the right word. "I don't know. It just doesn't fit." "Fine," Jimmy groused. "Happy freaking birthday." "There's the spirit," Felix said as Jimmy stormed out of the room. Felix ate his cupcake in 3 bites, then went back for a second. Maybe Jimmy wasn't so bad. Felix's morning was busy, which meant it went by so fast he couldn't dwell on the speech he was scheduled to deliver at the Rotary Club's luncheon. He had aced his public speaking and debate classes, so that wasn't what made his palms sweat during the drive across town. It was his ulterior motive for accepting the opportunity in the first place. There was a certain Rotarian he wanted to speak to, and the ordinary methods of scheduling an appointment hadn't been successful. By the time he arrived for the meeting, the sun was high in the sky and scorching the earth. Felix parked the car, then put on the tie and grabbed the blazer he'd brought with him. Christ, it had to be 100 degrees with the humidity, and the gentry still insisted on wearing formal attire for Rotary meetings. The business casual craze hadn't made it to Savannah yet. Once he was satisfied that his tie was straight, Felix turned off the car and quickly headed across the parking lot. He had every intention of drinking his weight in sweet tea during lunch. He reached the vestibule inside the building and skidded to a halt when he saw the sign for the event. It read, "The Rotary Club is proud to present Felix Franklin and Jude Arrow."
"Fuck me sideways,"
Felix murmured.
"That's a position we've never tried."
Chapter 3. The familiar deep voice was the psychological equivalent of an electromagnetic pulse bomb, short-circuiting the wiring in Felix's brain and shutting down his systems, one by one. Felix's vision dimmed first, then his hearing dulled, and his chest became tight from the trapped air in his failing lungs.
"Nope, he will not get the best of me."
Felix closed his eyes and counted to 10. Then he did it again before slowly reopening them. Felix turned to look into the sapphire blue eyes of the only person he had allowed to break his heart. Damn, the man looked even better in person than he did on TV. Bastard. His nemesis wore a charcoal gray suit with a pale green shirt and a paisley tie that would have looked dorky on anyone but him. Felix could tell by the way the fabric hugged Jude's broad shoulders, trim waist, and thick thighs that he hadn't bought it off the rack at a department store, as Felix had with his suit. Fancy bastard. "Jude." Felix's grim voice lent no doubt about his feelings toward the man. The corner of Jude's mouth twitched as if he were fighting off a grin. He must have won the battle because his lips stilled after a moment. "Hello?"
"Hello?"
Felix asked, his voice rising on the second syllable. Why had the word pissed him off so much? How else was Jude supposed to greet him? Hiya? Howdy? It shouldn't have rankled him, but it did. Jude raised an immaculately groomed raven eyebrow. "I would have added your name, but you forbade me from ever speaking it again." When Felix didn't have an immediate comeback, Jude grinned. "You do remember the scene you made on graduation day, right?"
"I remember the conversation,"
Felix corrected. It wasn't like he had stormed the stage, shoved the dean out of the way, and blurted out his demand through the microphone. Jude had called out his name after the ceremony as Felix strode across the quad's lush green grass for the final time. He'd been full of mixed emotions, pride for his accomplishment, anxiety over landing a job and putting his degree to good use, sadness from knowing he would never see Jude again, though he'd never voiced that truth out loud to anyone. He'd turned to face Jude, a spark of hope catching fire inside him. All Felix had needed to hear from the man were 2 words, "I'm sorry." Instead, Jude had said, "I want to make things right between us." Crossing his arms over his graduation robe, Felix had asked, "Why now?" "Felix, you act as if I haven't approached the conversation over the past 4 years. You're the one who hasn't wanted to talk about what happened." "Wrong again," Felix had said. "I'm tired of hearing you deflect and deny what you did.
I wanted you to apologize for deceiving me."
Jude's cheeks flushed red with anger.
"I won't apologize when I haven't done anything wrong. You were looking for reasons to push me away and grabbed hold of the first opportunities that came along. Why is it you can be so objective in every situation except for ones involving me?"
Felix shook his head.
"If you don't know the answer to the question, then we have nothing to talk about. In fact, do us both a favor and never speak my name again. Pretend you never met me, because I'm going to do everything in my power to forget you exist."
Staring into Jude's eyes now, it was impossible to forget the hurt he'd witnessed on graduation day. Felix had to forcibly remind himself of what a master liar and manipulator Jude had always been. His nemesis took 2 slow steps toward Felix, violating his personal space. He could have retreated a few steps, but fuck anyone who believed he would. Jude took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring. Then he leaned his head closer, giving Felix 2 options: pull back or meet that delicious mouth halfway. He held his ground instead, waiting to see how far Jude would push. "I have a news flash for you, Ace. I've said your name many times over the years, sometimes so powerfully there's no way in hell you didn't feel the rumble, regardless of the miles separating us. I'll let you decide exactly what I was doing during those moments." Jude straightened up, but didn't step back. Felix swallowed hard, but didn't say anything. He couldn't. His mouth felt like someone had shoved a wad of cotton balls inside it. Felix's tongue felt too heavy to move. Luckily, he was saved from responding when the Rotary president, Neil Jade, stepped into the vestibule.
"Great,"
Neil said, his booming voice echoing off the walls of the small space.
"Both our guest speakers are here. They're about to serve lunch, so come on in and get comfortable."
Felix was far removed from comfortable as he could get. The only thing that would make him feel better would be to turn around and walk out of the building. It wasn't an option. Not only did he refuse to give Jude the satisfaction of running him off, but he couldn't blow his opportunity to corner an elusive man who could be up to something unethical at best and highly illegal at worst. Felix's gut told him there was a story there, and he had to pursue it. That thought freed his tongue.
"Perfect," Felix said. "I appreciate you allowing me to speak to the club today. It's our pleasure. Savannah is lucky to have such esteemed reporters as yourselves."
"Honored to be here, Neil," Jude said.
"Follow me, fellas,"
the club president said before turning around and heading back inside the hall. Jude followed, halting only long enough to lean in once more. "Happy birthday, by the way." Felix wasn't surprised Jude remembered, but he was shocked Jude admitted he did. Felix remained in the vestibule for a few moments to gather himself, while Neil and Jude walked deeper into the room. When people noticed Jude, they immediately broke off their conversations and rushed to greet the annoyingly handsome man. Felix squared his shoulders and approached the cluster of people surrounding Jude. He expected some of them to show him equal attention, but only received a few smiles and some clipped nods, so he continued toward the head of the room, where a table was set up for the Rotary officers and the guest speakers. Neil Jade's nameplate sat in the middle of the table, and place cards for Felix and Jude sat on either side of it. Thank fuck Felix wouldn't have to bump elbows with Jude during the meal. Felix was careful to keep his expression neutral, while insidious bile-like bitterness burned a path up his esophagus and threatened to choke him. Once he reached his seat, he took a long drink of water to wash it back down. He was tempted to wipe his mouth with the back of his hand to give Savannah's finest the show they expected from him. No matter how hard he worked, or how many accolades he collected, It would never be good enough for people like him.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?